That's it, because there has been some level of confusion about that among the fans, some kind of uncertainty as to whether, people need to hang on to their DVD sets or not in terms of the contents.
Yeah, I mean, I'd recommend to people to do what I'm doing, really, which is
Hello, welcome to the second part of my chat with Chris Chapman, who is the producer and director of lots of Doctor Who documentary type stuff for DVD and Blu-rays. In this 4-part interview with Chris for my channel, we are talking specifically about his work for Doctor Who The Collection Season 8. And in this particular video, Chris and I are discussing the first film that he shot for this Blu-ray set, which is called The Direct Route. In this wonderful first instalment of a brand new series, Chris takes 3 fantastic classic Doctor Who directors on a 700-mile round trip around various locations on which they worked during Season 8. So let's discuss it.
This was recorded during that time when, COVID, I remember early March, COVID was kind of like a background concern, wasn't it? It was kind of like, it felt like a vague risk. I went to a gig on like March the 6th. And someone offered me a hand to shake, and I sort of hesitated, but shook it anyway. It was kind of that kind of, we had no idea what was going to happen.
No, and it's that period when we were singing "Happy Birthday" as we washed our hands.
Yeah,
and actually, this is still a week or two before the last BFI event for Doctor Who, when they did, which I remember actively not making a decision not to go to, because it was the weekend before the Terence and the Oldbourne shoot were due. So I said, I'm not going to go, because that's too many people that I might come into contact with that I could then take something on the shoot, and that would be bad. But Direct Route is kind of a week or two before that. And yeah, for those very naive times in retrospect, it was a great time. It was 3 days where we traveled. On camera, we travel 620 odd miles. We did more of that in reality, because we had to get from our homes to the first location and then back again afterwards. So over 3 days, it was exhausting. And I wanted to do, I've always thought that something, directors are such a key part of the Doctor Who process. And we'd done writers in the writer's room, and we had like an actor thing going on, a showbiz actor thing in the Doctor's table. And I thought, let's do something with directors. And the interesting thing, I think, with Doctor Who directors is they're all, a load of these guys are big characters, very articulate guys who've been in telly for years and know it backwards. And but never the twain shall meet. They stay on their own shoots, they direct their own stories. And unlike a producer or a script editor who might bounce between those stories, the director has his assignment. He may never see the work of the other directors on that season. He certainly won't go on their sets. He won't go and visit them and say hi. And they kind of existed at the BBC as these slightly kind of sibling figures to each other, with competitive rivalry between directors who'd come up through the system, some of whom had assisted each other and then grown above the fella they'd assisted.
Yeah.
So really interesting dynamics. But to get them together, to say, let's make a little gang and let's get them on the road and visit all the big locations from that season, and get a chance to look at the clips and reflect on the other director's work and say, well, I wouldn't have done it like that. Or, oh, I can't believe he did it like that. I would never have thought of, how did he do this? Location's crazy. How would he have done it here? And to give a different perspective on these things that could be quite familiar. I'd worked with all 3 of them before, and they're great guys. They're really lovely guys. We would have, I was hoping that we'd have Mike Ferguson, who directed Claws of Axos, involved as well, but Mike's health has been a bit in decline, so we weren't able to get Mike. But he sent his blessings and his love. But yeah, it was 3 guys who were all in their like late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. But in Michael Bryant's case, Michael Bryant is still sailing the world. I'll get emails when he's coming in and out of these harbours and ports all over.
He's got a YouTube channel, doesn't he, Michael?
Yes. What's it called? It's called like sailing along, or sailing
gently.
Sailing gently.
Sailing gently. I'll put a link down in the video description if anyone wants to subscribe to Michael Bryant's sailing channel.
You should. And he's not I always amazes me that he calls it sailing gently, because he's lived this very adventurous life. He's been boarded by pirates and stuff like this in the past. He's lived a crazy life as Michael Bryant. So we're very happy having him back. And yeah, so we started in Dover Castle, to Dungeness for the Axon landing site, all the way down the south coast of England to the planet Xerius, isn't it, in Colony in Space?
Yes.
Which is Old Ball clay pit down in Cornwall.
And that's a particularly nice moment, isn't it? Because of course, two of the directors in this film had worked on that, right? Yeah.
So we slightly cheat, because Graeme Harper didn't direct a story that season, but became obviously a kind of illustrious Who director, but had been the AFM, the assistant floor manager on Colony in Space alongside Graeme Harper. So you think this is legit. And I'd never seen the location from Colony gone back to. Richard Bignell has never got back there for now and then because it's all private land. It's all kind of, if you look on the location websites, it'll be fans taking pictures from the outside of a fence saying, I think it's over there.
Yeah.
And I was so keen to go back because that feels like, I know Colony is almost like the overlooked story of that season, but I think it's the ultimate Doctor Who quarry. It's the one quarry that feels gigantic, that feels epic, more so than things like I guess kind of Survival and the Savages and Death to the Daleks and things like that. So we did the pit, and we meet staff members who were there at the time, who actually kind of set off the explosions that you see on screen in Colony in Space. Are still working there now.
How do you go about sort of creating an atmosphere that's kind of relaxed? Because that very much comes across. You can imagine a lot of people might get quite het up and sort of trying to rack their brains for like entertaining stories and stuff, but it doesn't feel like that at all.
No, thank you. Well, I'm glad it feels like that. I guess it's almost not making too big a deal of it. It's not making people self-aware. It's letting, first and foremost, if those guests can have a relationship, a rapport that strikes up with the other guests, that they meet people like Michael Briant and they're bouncing off them. I want them to kind of forget that I'm there, that the camera's there. I don't want them to worry about what the camera's doing or where it is. I just want them to have a chat with a human being. And once you boil it down to that and reassure people that, we're not here to stitch you up or trip you up. We're not journalists. You're not a politician. This is a nice situation. And I think people realize that the reason that we brought them on board is that they have an important story to tell. It's not like you're thinking to yourself, I won't say anything interesting. If you're thinking that, I probably, to be honest, won't have asked you to take part in the first place. So you feel like you've got some ammunition, you've got something to say, and then you meet these nice people, and I try and create a really happy, nice, informal situation on set. And then, of course, I edit it. So I take it, and those conversations might last 3 times, 4 times as long, and I'm boiling it down to the stuff I think is the core of it and is the best stuff.
And I suppose the obvious question there then, after like a 700-mile road trip, is how many hours of footage did you have?
On that one, well, on a lot of these at the moment, we're shooting with multi-cameras as well. So we're often, rather than having to do retake after retake, if 2 people are having a conversation, then we've got 2 cameras set up. So one camera's on one person, one camera's on the other person, and it feels more spontaneous and natural. And so if you include that footage, the doubled up footage, you're well into, oh God, I mean, on something like the direct route, you've probably got about 10 hours of footage, if not more than that. It might be like 10 to 15 hours of footage, of which maybe 4 or 5 hours of that is content, if you know what I mean, is kind of unique spoken words that you could say is stuff that happened, is real stuff. And
do you have a way of kind of marking things as you go along that is going to be absolute gold?
No, I'll just remember. As we're shooting, I'll just be thinking, "Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. That's good." And I'll have a residual opinion on it because you need to do that in order to let the course of the film change and to respond and to say, "Oh, I hadn't considered that, but that's important, and let's follow up on that." And then in the edit, I like to come at it quite fresh, and I'll just watch everything again, like the whole lot. And sometimes things that you thought were great, aren't or don't make sense, and you go, oh no, well, we don't need that because we've got that and that, so let's get rid of that. And then it's lovely. It's just trying to. I don't know how to describe it. It's that simplicity of when you've got a room full of your favorite objects, but it's a complete mess. And in the streamlining of that room and in the slimming down of it, you make it purer and better and more itself. It becomes a better version of itself by being slimmed down. So I'm a great believer in, we could have made an hour in Oldbourne. We could have made a 2-hour Terrence Dicks film. We could have made an hour and a half direct route, but they wouldn't be as good. They wouldn't be as sharp, and you would, some people would stick with those the whole time, and I'm sure enjoy that. But I think the average person would go, oh, haven't they done this bit? Haven't they? Oh, I feel like I've been here for ages, or this is outstayed its welcome a bit. And so I do like to truncate.
I suppose it must be kind of hard to judge because obviously, in the context of the world, the whole world, this is reasonably niche material, isn't it? And so you've got an audience who want
incredibly niche material, Jason.
Well, yeah, let's be honest. Yeah. And I'm loving, by the way, that what we're doing here essentially is a making of. It's like sort of an endless chain. Maybe someone will interview me about interviewing you.
People have said, like, you should do a documentary about the making of one of your, and you're like, I don't know if that's like the tail, that's like the snake eating its own tail at that point. It's a bit mad. I think that it's a nice process. And what you were saying about whose perspective, I guess, you're thinking about when a whole world is going to be watching this, you have to make it for you. I mean, ultimately, you have to make it. You'd go mad if you tried to second guess, what so and so. What I do try and think about is this bit already known? Have we told the story before elsewhere? So if I'm editing the Oldbourne revisit, and a story is told on camera that I know is already in the making of, or on the commentary, and I'm thinking, do I keep that or do I keep this new bit? I'm going to keep the new bit, of course. I want to add to the discussion and grow the world rather than repeat it, or it becomes a convention of just repeated, reheated anecdotes that we go round and round until fandom collapses.
I guess so. I mean, it's great that you kind of apply that kind of, diligence to it in terms of wanting to bring something new, but at the same time, I could imagine the way you're approaching films now and the kind of scale and lavishness of them. I think you could warrant just completely remaking a documentary that was on a DVD in 2002 or something, with it in a new style, and it would still be, people would still love that, wouldn't they?
I don't know. I mean, I just want us to do new stuff, really.
Yeah.
I think, and I also respect those films. I mean, if you think something like, I mean, I work a lot with Ed Stradling, and he's a good friend of mine, and Ed continues to do great work.
Yeah.
But something like Ed's Trials and Tribulations film, he'd be the first to say, is not a particularly technically mind-blowing structure or format. It's people sat in front of potted plants that have been lit in an interesting color. But that's not why we're watching it. We're watching it because it has these amazing interviews and insights and content. And Ed, as a lawyer, historically, he comes at it as a lawyer would, and he structures it in this beautiful, I'm making a court case, I'm putting together an essay approach. And so we could remake that in fancier locations, but I don't think you'd actually benefit from that. I don't think the film would benefit from that.
It's true, because I mean, ultimately, it does come down to the people, isn't it? That's what we're interested in.
Yeah, I mean, all we're doing at the moment is better window dressing, but that's the fun stuff, that's the stuff that brings it to life.
And it's also wonderful that all the DVD, pretty much all the DVD stuff is on these wonderful archive creations.
I think it's all on. I don't think we've had anything so far that we've not been able to include. I think it's all been stuff that's just been rehoused to a more suitable set.
That's it, because there has been some level of confusion about that among the fans, some kind of uncertainty as to whether, people need to hang on to their DVD sets or not in terms of the contents,
Yeah, I mean, I'd recommend to people to do what I'm doing, really, which is I keep the DVDs until the box set comes out. So as soon as as soon as season 8, I have it in my hand, I will then find a good new home for the DVDs and give them away to somebody who might like to see them. And I wouldn't say to anybody, throw away all your DVDs now, partly because it's going to take us ages to do these, so you might want to watch them.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no guarantee. I mean, I remember thinking, I don't know if they're going to be able to include the Gallifreyan Candidates, the film we made about the Manchurian Candidate, on Deadly Assassin, because the archive was very expensive and we'd cleared it for a certain amount of time, and I think it had to be re-cleared for the Blu-ray. And I thought, well, that's a prime candidate for a film that you might think wouldn't make the leap. And no, it's not a great film anyway, but it is, as a completist, you'd want your stuff.
I want as much Deadly Assassin stuff as I can get.
Well, exactly, and fortunately, I don't know how what they did, but they were able to clear it again and keep it included. So there is that diligence going on, that they don't want to leave a man behind. You know, they want to make sure that everything gets carried over. And Pete McTee works alongside Russell, and Pete does a very good job of, I think he's got an uber massive document of where everything should go in order to make things make more sense. You know.
Wow. So to the best of your knowledge, there hasn't been anything yet that has been left on the DVDs?
Yeah, there will, certainly to the best of my knowledge, there is nothing that has been kicked out. You know, everything has either been ported over or saved for a more suitable spot. I'm not aware of anything that we said that's not going to be seen again. You know, but obviously, you know, who knows? I don't know the details of future sets, but in terms of what we've done so far.
One last question on the direct route. How many people in that crew? I mean, do you have like someone handling the drones?
Who do we have on? It varies for every shoot. On that one, basically, the rule of thumb is the longer the shoot needs to be, the smaller the crew will be, because I can either afford a larger crew for one day or a crew a third of that size for 3 days, because it's the same amount of money, and I have to kind of make it work one way or the other. So something like the Doctor's Table, which is all shot in one day in a restaurant, you know, production values go through the roof, because I can suddenly have 5 cameras and I can have 4 camera operators and 2 people in makeup and 2 runners, and, you know, so it's a bigger team. Something like direct route is much more slimmed down. So that is predominantly the way we did that, or pretty much like 95% of the camera, of the ground level camera, is me holding a camera,
right?
And I'm recording my own sound. So all of the sound in the film is sound I've recorded. And then so there's me, and there's Toffer, who was doing drone, which I can't do, and he would also sometimes step in to do a second camera. For instance, there's a couple of bits when you can see people sit down at a table to chat, and there are obviously 2 cameras going. So Toffer's manning the second camera, I'm manning the first, and then we had 2 runners. We had a lady called Charlotte Broken Bow and Michael Williams as runners on that one. And they basically, you know, as you'd expect, are just there to kind of facilitate me and Toffer and our guests, and that's it.
Wow.
So it's 4 of us on that, and we could go smaller. You know, we could. You know, I've done quite a few, done bits of Doctor Who where it's just been me solo, and we can do that, but it's just more stressful.
Wow.
So that would have been 4 of us who just strapped in for the whole journey.
My goodness me. Right. Well, let's
driving ourselves around and all that. Oh, and we had a black cab driver actually called Carl Harrington, who is literally a London black cab driver, who we rented him and his cab for 3 days, and so he's literally just driving them around the whole time. So there's Carl as well. Crucially, there's Carl.
I love that the whole thing was done in that kind of space of time that the film suggests as well. There's no cheating, is there? It's not done over a period of months.
No, it's all, and it's just easier, you know, with anything like this. If you can put it in a production block and do it in one go, it's always going to be the smarter way of getting availability, you know, being able to do it. So no, it's 3 days, and it is that distance, which is crazy.
I hope you've enjoyed this chat with Chris. If the other 3 parts of this interview are currently in existence, then I will put links to them around this screen. But if not, you'll simply have to subscribe in order to see the rest of them, won't you? Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I also hope you'll enjoy the next one. Until then, don't forget to embrace your obsession.